This is The Sports Source, presented by Bill Hotz and Associates, and by Renewal by Andersen, with your host, John Pennington.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into The Sports Source, presented by Renewal by Andersen today. Tennessee wins its 14th basketball game in a row yesterday. We'll discuss that. Tennessee is in the heart of recruiting season. We'll look at the top 7 prospects on the board, whether Tennessee can get them or not. Lady Vols, the 6-game losing streak. We'll discuss whether or not Holly Warlick, if things don't turn around, whether or not Phillip Fulmer would fire Holly Warlick. Lots to cover today. Let's get right into it. First segment of our program brought to you by Renewal by Andersen. Call, buy, schedule installation, all by January 31st, and get 15% off windows. Call them, drop by, buy it, schedule the installation by January 31st, which means you got middle of this week, 15% off windows and patio doors. No money down, no interest payments for 12 whole months. Save money on your energy bill, increase the value of your home. That's what Renewal by Andersen can do for you. Check them out at any of those online, the actual location. Give them a call. Renewal by Andersen. Now check these guys out. First wave of panelists we have right here. Former Vol basketball assistant Mark Pankratz. Right there, Jimmy Himes and Josh Ward from WNML, and Hall of Fame sports writer Mike Strange down there at the end. Tennessee made it to 18-1 this week, held on to their #1 ranking. For a while there against Vanderbilt on Wednesday, it looked like history might repeat, but they get through there with a big help from Grant Williams, 43 points. Started slow yesterday before just absolutely annihilating a Bob Huggins West Virginia team. What did we learn about Tennessee this week? What stood out to you, Mark Pankratz?
Well, I think anytime you can pull out a win on the road in that environment with what Grant and the rest of those guys did, I think it was impressive. And being able to get focused in for a West Virginia team that is good, a non-conference game, sometimes guys aren't necessarily motivated. These guys honed in, and I think they showed some of what their identity is and what it needs to be.
Takeaways for the week?
I think we learned that it's really hard to play at a consistently high level, and I think it also showed that Tennessee still has some flaws. Maybe it's a few minutes of a stretch where they don't play very good defense. Maybe it's a stretch where they don't have very good offense, like against West Virginia. But I don't know that I think Tennessee's played a complete 40 minutes on offense and defense since Georgia. But they've had some spurts. Now, they're really good, don't get me wrong, but they've had some spurts where they haven't played that well. That's typical of most teams. That's kind of nitpicking. But I do think every now and then some flaws will show up with them in terms of being consistent.
And the impressive thing is, usually the Alabama game a week ago, the Vanderbilt game where some flaws were exposed, close game, those are a good team will lose those.
Right.
A great team finds a way to win. And again, I am using the word great. We'll see how that ends up, but I think they're a great team at this point. Josh.
Yeah, I think we either learned or were reminded that while Tennessee has good depth and a number of guys that can score, I mean, look at what Lamonte Turner did coming off the bench and scoring against West Virginia, the Tennessee's still going to need somebody like Admiral Schofield to go along with Grant Williams, probably lead the way. And Admiral can do other things. He's shown that this week to help Tennessee. Rick Barnes talked about that. But the Gonzaga game would be the example. That's a big game against a big-time team. And the guys that have led the way, I think, are still going to have to do that.
Yeah, Schofield, starting to the last 3 games, he's 2 of 15 from three-point range. That's something that kind of stood out to me over the last 3 games. His shooting touch hadn't been there from the outside. Mike Strange, what did you learn this week?
Well, I learned at in the West Virginia game, it was good to see the defense come back because I don't think they've been playing typical Rick Barnes Tennessee defense for several games. Vanderbilt in particular, you could go back to Alabama and Arkansas even, I think. But I thought in the West Virginia came out and made some shots, and then Tennessee clamped them down for, 10 or 11 minutes. So I think that was a good sign to see that defense intensity return.
One of the things, too, about Mike's point, the second half, I think, of 3 of the last 4 games, opponents have shot over 50%. Yeah. Even West Virginia did it. But that's been a little bit of a concern, too, the second half defense.
Yeah, from what we're learning about what those deficiencies are is being able to guard the basketball. And you've seen it. Teams have now started to focus in on Florida, spread us out, and teams got some success against that. You saw Vanderbilt getting that high post action, the double horns action, and then what did West Virginia do? They kept pounding that ball in that high post, and Tennessee has got to find ways to to pressure that, get it out further, because coaches, they don't reinvent the wheel. They duplicate what they see as successful in the previous games, and Tennessee struggled versus Vanderbilt to be able to guard that high post, and West Virginia had some success on it early on.
And that's pretty typical for college basketball in general. You play a 30-game season, rare is the team that can come out on game one, this is what we do. And by the time you get to game 30, we've not had to change anything. No one's caught on. No one's guarded us differently. Nobody's played offense against us. So it's a constant cat and mouse game, trying to catch up, stay ahead of the curve a little bit. Rick Barnes, of course, is a Hall of Fame coach. I mean, I don't have any fears that he'll be able to do that. But again, to me, that's one reason I'm so impressed by this team only having one loss at this point. We haven't seen that out of a Tennessee team before. Usually, when somebody else starts to catch up, there's a loss that goes in that wheelhouse where you're having to fix it. This team keeps right on winning even as they're fixing things.
Well, it's because to what Josh was saying about like Schofield, his shot's not falling, but he's still affecting the game in other ways. When Kyle Anderson doesn't have a good game, he's still affecting the game in other ways, and that's because Barnes gets them to buy in to the team aspect and what they're really good at.
Let me go ahead and put up Grant Williams' numbers for the week. I mean, we know what he did at Vanderbilt, 43-point night, 23 of 23 from the line. I can't remember a big man having that kind of night at the line. It reminded me, as a kid who grew up a Tennessee fan in Middlesboro, Kentucky, it reminded me of Kyle Macy, who I despised as a kid, who shot 90%. Unbelievable effort from Grant Williams, just all over. But look at the week. I mean, he shot 65% for the week, 91% from the line, 62 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, 5 blocks, 4 steals. That is Player of the Year type stuff, which yesterday Dick Vitale named him his midseason National Player of the Year. Thoughts on Grant Williams?
Well, the one thing on the free throws, he had the most made free throws without a miss. There's only one other guy in Division I history that has done that, and that was back in 1959. That's pretty impressive.
That's Jimmy Himes level shooting. Right?
Well, almost. Almost. Going back, I did ask Grant Williams, I said, the first time you went to the foul line, were you thinking about that? He said, no, not really. But I did wonder. You've been on a stretch. It's kind of like a golfer that shoots a 62. It's kind of hard to match it.
Right.
And so I wondered and of course he missed the first time he was at the line.
He missed 3 on Saturday. Better get back in the gym.
That's right. 9 out of 12 isn't bad, though.
Let me also put up the remaining schedule for Tennessee. We move along here. You see right here, South Carolina and A&M both on the road this week. We'll discuss that a little later in the show, preview both those games, Missouri, Florida, South Carolina. But as we said before the SEC schedule started, we broke it down on the show and said, look, it is backloaded, and it looks even more backloaded than it did a couple of weeks ago when we looked at it. Kentucky twice ranked, LSU ranked, Ole Miss was ranked, may still be ranked after their loss yesterday, Mississippi State, Auburn. That is a rough schedule at the end. We said before the season, the average, since the SEC went to an 18-game schedule, the average record for the champion is 15-3. Everyone here said, oh, I'd take that. If you could take 15-3 right now, do you do it? We all said yes. That would mean finishing 9-3 over the final 12. Do you still take 15-3?
I do. I still think that wins the SEC also.
Yeah. I take it in a heartbeat because, like we've been talking, the schedule's backloaded. So if you're going to have 3 losses, they're going to be in that back half of the schedule.
And I think you still wind up probably a number 1 or number 2 seed if you only have 4 losses going into the tournament.
I think yes, I take it, but I would say it depends on those 3 because if they're the last if they're the last 3 regular season games of the year, all of a sudden now do you get a 1 or a 2 seed because it's just like in football, right? If you lose a game early on the season, it's forgotten about by the end of it. So if you lose them now as opposed to the last 3, it might not affect your season.
Yeah, you don't want 2 to be against Kentucky because Kentucky continues to climb up and that could bump you down.
And beat Kansas last night at Rupp.
Yeah.
One thing the NCAA is talking about is trying to make the front of the season count as much as the end of the season. So their new net rankings that they're using, which we'll show you later, that have replaced the RPI, those really don't take into account they finished hot. However, the human mind knows who finishes hot. So it might not be in their rankings. They may say they're not going to look at it. But I think you're right. If you do drop the last 3 or 3 or last 4, that's a different beast. That can have people looking sideways at you on Selection Sunday. All right. When we come back, we're going to talk. Well, let me tell you, a little bit later, as I mentioned earlier, if push comes to shove, would Philip Fulmer shove Holly Warlick out of a job? We'll discuss the Lady Vols situation a little bit later in the show. But next, attendance down for Tennessee football. What is the fix? If the answer is winning, well, yeah, Philip Fulmer says something else is involved too. Come on back, we'll discuss.